Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Morris. I am the Director of Business Development for Gaming for GTS Distribution. Welcome to another one of our webinars. I'm very excited to introduce you to Mike Young, the Lead of Communications for Plan B Games. Mike is here in America. As most of you know, Plan B is an international company. Plan B is one of our exclusives at GTS. We do the hobby distribution exclusively for them in the United States for their games. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Azul, the Spiel des Jahres winner from last year, which is an absolutely superbly wonderful, fun game. Today, we're going to be talking about three very cool games. The first one is a game that was just recently released around the January timeframe of this year called Blackout Hong Kong. The next two are going to be pre-orders that are coming up for the Origins timeframe. And I'm very happy to tell everybody these are actually on the water and they are making their way to us in the US. So they will be here right around that Origins timeframe, which is great news. Those two games are going to be Tuki and Century: A New World, which is the third part of the Century epic saga, I guess. It's Plan B's endgame, I guess you could say, in some ways. So it's going to be really cool. So just as a bit of housekeeping, just so everybody knows. So first thing is that if you are new, or even if you're experienced and haven't used this before, if you hover over your window, there will be a little menu bar that will pop up at the bottom, and there is a chat bubble at the kind of the middle area. If you click on the chat bubble and then where you type in your questions, you can do a drop down to either all panelists, which will come to Mike and myself and Jessica, who's our sales director, who's on the phone here with us. Or you can choose all panelists and attendees, and that will send your message to everyone. So as I tell everybody, everything is on the table. Any questions you have, feel free to let us know and fire away. So that's no problem. We'll be happy to answer anything you got. As a reminder as to the program that we have going on with the webinar. So every retailer who is here live, you're going to be eligible to get a free demo copy of the what we call Available Now game, which is Blackout Hong Kong. Superbly fun Euro kind of resource management game. I actually really love the game a lot. We're going to be able to get you a free demo copy of that game. Nothing for you to do. Simply once this webinar is over, the software will capture all the information about the people who had pre-registered and joined, and then we will get that over to the GTS sales reps. They will contact you, get that all set up, and get that moving. In addition, though, if you purchase Blackout Hong Kong, or if you pre-order Tuki or Century: A New World between today, April 29th, and next Monday, May 6th, you'll be able to get 52% off MSRP, which is tremendous, gives you a little bit of extra margin, which is always a good thing to cover all of the grocery bills and all the fun things that we have to pay for as brick and mortar retailers. If you have any questions, though, like I said, feel free to pop them in the chat. With that, I will take my face that was made for radio, I will shut it up, and I will let Mr. Young begin his presentation and share information with you. Mike, thanks so much for joining. The floor is yours.
All right, thanks, Scott, and welcome, everyone. So briefly, I want to take just a few minutes to kind of go over just topically who we are, who Plan B is, because we have multiple imprints, and one common thing that I see from others are questions about why do we imprint, and what is this game, where do I find that, just to kind of help clarify our stance on things and how it benefits you as retailers and our common consumers, but also then to go over specifically some of the games that we have coming out. So briefly, let me just set this PowerPoint up here and I'll just kind of go over it. And if there's any questions that come up along the way, don't hesitate to pop in. If Scott needs to, he'll be welcome to interrupt me and we can answer them, or we can wait till towards the end. So let me move this out of the way here. All right, so briefly, Plan B Games, if you're not familiar, who we are. So we publish titles under the following imprints. Obviously, Plan B Games is one of them. We also have Next Move Games, Pretzel Games, Eggertspiele. And the way I have always described these imprints is that Plan B is kind of like the mother, who has these gorgeous looks and beautiful and quite smart and charming, but each of the imprints have their own distinct personality. And we'll go into what those personalities are and how we can best utilize that when trying to pre-order games, market games towards our consumers. So a little bit about us. I consider us young with an old soul. We only have 3 years on the books. Origins will be our 3rd year attending. Most of our staff, though, and this is where the old soul comes in, most of our staff has 5 to 10 years plus experience in the hobby gaming market, meaning we're quite entrenched. the thought process that I think that we have with this is that with that experience, with the amount of experience we've got in the hobby and working on games, we really produce amazing products. I say this with full humility. Our games are gorgeous. They play really quick. They're fun, and I think they're distinct and unique. The staff has all been handpicked by Sophie, our CEO, and it's always been our mission statement to focus on quality games over quantity. So unlike some publishers, we're not going to crank out 20 or 30 games a year, especially difficult for a retailer like you guys to figure out which one's which, who's which games are best for my customers, what should I be ordering. Instead, we're going to focus on 1 or 2 titles per imprint a year, basically Gen Con and Essen timeframe. So as I alluded to earlier, one of the questions that I get a lot is, why do we have imprints and what do these imprints stand for? Basically, it's brand identity. The imprints in our mind help consumers and retailer manage expectations for the titles that you're going to find on that line. So the way I look at it is, if I really like a game on one line, odds are I'll like the others. So for example, if I'm a big fan of Azul, I'll probably enjoy Tuki or maybe Reef. If I'm a big fan of Great Western Trail, which is found on the Eggertspiele line, I'll probably enjoy Blackout Hong Kong. Or if I'm a big fan of dexterity games, I'm probably going to like Pretzel Games, which is all dexterity. So the idea here isn't so much to create a bunch of different publishers, but instead to manage expectations as to what you're going to get when you pick up a box. If I get a Next Move game, it's going to have a certain feel to it, a certain weight to it, and a certain game length. Same with Eggertspiele, same with Pretzel and Plan B. So moving on specifically for Plan B games, the target demographics I would say that we aim to make games for are the gateway family casual gamers, people who are looking for like really high replayability games that have good components, but these games won't last longer than 69 minutes. Perfect for, again, that gateway crowd. But it's also, these games usually have enough meat on the bones so that even experienced gamers who are looking for a strategically rich game or a really good Euro without a heavy rule set, that can be played in less than an hour. The key title on the line would be the Century series. You'll see Century, Eastern Wonders, and coming up New World, as well as the Golem edition. So between those two lines, well, I should say Golem's just a standalone, you're going to see a lot of gateway fans who just like want to jump on that. Specifically, Century New World. This is a $40 MSRP. This is the conclusion to the Century Trilogy. It is not quite Avengers in-game epic level experience, but what I do think is really cool about it is that, like Eastern Wonders, this is a mixable game, meaning that you can take this game and play it with Century Spice Road, play it with Century Eastern Wonders, or combine any of the 3 to create a total of 7 unique rule sets. So I don't think any other lines have done this. We've seen expansions, but full fleshed out rule sets for these making them unique games is a pretty cool factor for me. The target audience, I think, would be Century fans, obviously, people who are Gateway Euro fans, casual fans who maybe want a little extra value in their games, who maybe want a slightly larger variety of games and rules, but with a smaller footprint, like the Marie Kondo kind of thing, where I don't want to have 200 games in my library, maybe 150, but this would give me a couple extra games in there. So Century in itself is a fantastic title for us and has always been pretty well at selling for us. On the screen here, I've just brought in a quick info or a quick graphic. The difference between this one and the other ones is that this is a worker placement / worker displacement game. So think of it as just about a half a step up from Stone Age, if you will, for complexity, where players are going to be placing their meeples out there to allocate resources and trade resources. It's still got the Century DNA in it. So if you've liked one of the games, odds are you're going to like the rest of them, because the formula, the core elements are still very much the same, but they are still distinctly different. This one bringing in just a little extra more with when it comes to worker placement. It's one of my favorite style. you have a worker tab or your own personal tableau, as well as some unique customizable features. So lots there for your casual fans, but also plenty there to explore for your more intense or your hardcore gamers.
Mike, there was a couple of questions on chat, and I just wanted to kind of address one of them real quick. You touched on it real briefly about the fact that the original plan from the beginning for Century titles was that each game stands alone and stands on their own as their complete own game, but that you can combine them. The way you get to the 7 possible connections here is each game on their own is 1 rule set, so you have 3 right there. You can combine them in any format. So you can combine Century Spice Road, which is number 1, and Century Eastern Wonders, which is number 2, to make a game set in and of itself. You can combine Eastern Wonders and Century A New World just as those 2 on their own. You can also combine Century A New World and Century Spice Road, which is 1 and 3, combine those together. Or you can do the entire mashup and mash up all 3 together. So that's where you end up with 7 different things. I actually went to a meeting this weekend, and I had a really interesting conversation, and I thought this was really poignant to share for this. The original game, Century Spice Road, was all around having cards and playing those cards to take a resource and change it into other resources to then get victory points. And in a way, that's the entire thematic of the entire games, is that you take something that is great on its own, but you combine it with other things to make it even better and a different experience altogether, which was a very kind of subtle meta discussion around how Emerson had put together the design for these games. But the more important thing, which I thought was really interesting, was that Century was compared to other card drafting type games in terms of simplicity and ease of learning the game. And then Eastern Wonders cranked it up a little bit in terms of the rule set and a little more things going on to it. And then it looks like Century also does that a little bit as well, kind of taking a step up, not by any means saying that any of these games are complex, but just that if you were a new gamer, introducing someone to Century Spice Road and then introducing them to Century Eastern Wonders and then introducing them into Century New World, by the end of that journey, that person is going to be a diehard, like, dedicated lover of board games, which I thought was a really interesting discussion and probably would be good to just share with the retailers there. So didn't mean to interrupt, but just thought it would be a good thing to add.
To catapult off that, it's the way I look at it is that Century is definitely a hand building game and a tableau management game, and then you have Eastern Wonders, which is a little bit more point to point movement, where you're doing like pickup and delivery, and then Century New World is a worker placement. So it's almost like, in my mind, that you've gotten very distilled. And one of the compliments I can give Emerson in terms of designs, it's always very pure and simple, is that you have the purest, most simplest forms of these game mechanisms, these really popular game mechanisms that can interact with each other. So as you alluded to, you can take someone who's just kind of a casual gateway gamer and introduce them to different and new ones. So really, really good. These are excellent copies to have in any convention library or any retailer library, because I shop locally here in Jacksonville. I see tons of these being played just because of that simplicity. There's not a lot of overarching rules. Almost all of our rule sets are front and back, single page, making it even easier to get into without feeling overwhelmed. So that being said, I'll move on to into next move games. And again, don't hesitate to interrupt me if you need to. So next move games, the target demographics here are going to be like your fans of abstract games. So people who, I'm trying to think of, there's a whole line of some European publishers, but the name's eluding me. But abstract game fans, puzzle game fans, we even have a card line starting with 5211 that'll be coming out later this year, designed for that crowd. Again, gateway, family, casual gamers looking for games with high replayability, good components, great art that doesn't last longer than 60 minutes. And again, really good for experienced gamers who want strategically rich games that typically play around an hour. One thing I hear time and time again when it comes to especially this line is they're all addictively fun. We want to play again, and we want to play again, and we want to play again. And all of a sudden I've played 4 or 5 games of Azul, and I don't realize it, but it's already midnight. The key titles on this line are going to be the Azul series. If you haven't, been out from under your rock in the last year or two, Azul is one of the better selling games the last couple of years. It's for a good reason. It looks great and it plays great. The next one that we're introducing is Tuki, which, forgive me, I won't be able to pronounce Gregory's last name, but the designer of Umongo designed Tuki. It's a puzzle game which uses very similar elements here. You're going to use 3D blocks to match patterns and shapes. I'll show you a picture in just a second. What's cool is that in the box, you're going to have 600 unique puzzles to solve in this. So there's going to be very little chance that any game is going to be identical one to the next. And you also have a basic and expert mode version of the box. So one's going to be perfect for your family crowd. And then when they've graduated up, or you've got the the gamer who's wanted to take on a bigger challenge, you also have the expert mode in the box. Amazing art, components. I really like the unique theme, which is the Inukshuks, which are those stone statues which the Inuits built to kind of transmit messages to each other. You know, maybe this is a safe hunting ground, or this is a good place to stay, or you'll find animals congregating here. The target audience for this group is going to be obviously fans for puzzle games because there's a spatial puzzle element to it. But there's a lot of crossover appeal here with fans with Azul and Reef because of the component quality, because of the design aesthetics. You'll see that it's right there. And anyone who wants a really fun family game that's not crazily priced, this is only $40. It's going to be right up their alley. And here's just a quick image of what that looks like. You're going to be using these Tetris-like pieces to match the symbol that you have on the card. You roll the dice to determine what pattern you're going to get. So it's surprising you only need about 200, 300 cards, but 200 cards, but you're going to get a variety of those. Plus, we're going to be publishing all the solutions on our website so that if someone's particularly stuck on how to build something, they can reference it.
Hey, Mike, just as a quick note to retailers, if retailers aren't familiar with it, GTS has a consumer marketing channel called Active Player Network, which is on YouTube. We do a lot of, combination of different things. We do a lot of commercial style videos, which will be like a minute to a minute and a half style videos about the games that are coming out. We also do a lot of live interviews and open box stuff and things like that. They just posted last week a great video on Tuki. I'll put it into the Zoom webinar chat so everyone can have the link to it and check it out. And we'll make sure to put it in the link as we record this video and put it up on YouTube as well. But this is a deceptively cool strategy game in terms of it looks so simple and it looks so easy and it's challenging at times, but it's challenging in a fun way, which is really cool. But just want to make sure everyone knew about it. I'll put a note into the Zoom webinar chat here so people can check that video out later. Yeah,
one of the things that I really like about it is that while it's not necessarily a dexterity game, though it kind of looks like one, there is a little bit of a timed element because you're kind of competing to be the first one to solve it. Or to not be, rather, I should say, not to be the last one to solve it. So it's deceptively easy. It looks simple, it looks clean, but man, is it it's tricky. And to do it under time constraints makes it even tougher. Next up, Pretzel Games. I'm not going to talk about any titles today with like minute work, but just so that you're familiar with the imprint, this is a dexterity line. The target demographics are people who like dexterity games. So anyone who would be a big fan of Flick 'em Up, Junk Art, Pitch Car, Hamster Roll, any of that kind of stuff, you're going to find games here. This is really good for your family, your gateway, your casual gamers who want high replayability, wants amazing components because all of our pieces are going to be wooden moving forward. And great art on the boxes. Again, less than 60 minutes per game length. People who want really fun games with a great table presence, this is your line. Key titles on here: Junk Art, Flick 'em Up series. Not much more to say there. We don't have a title releasing at Origins or Gen Con, but keep your eyes peeled because we have a few more in development. And then the Eggertspiele line. So Eggertspiele, our target demographics here are going to be like your medium plus gamers. I don't want to say that the titles are heavy. You're not going to be overwhelmed with rules like maybe you would be with like one of the Vital Lasarda games. But this is going to be great for gamers who want a really rich Euro with good art, amazing components, with have a little bit more complexity than your traditional gateway games. A lot of that stuff I just call it kind of medium plus. Most of these titles are going to be 60 minutes minimum, but probably 90 to 120. The key titles in the line. Great Western Trail is, if you're not carrying this or stocking this, this is one of the best Euros in the last couple of years. Coimbra, which we published last year, is really, really fun. And then Camel Up, which has been a perennial favorite. It was a Spiel des Jahres winner several years ago. This is kind of the oddball out because it's more of a family weight game, but because of its prestige and history, we want to keep it with the Eggertspiele imprint. Specifically for Blackout Hong Kong. So this is, I think the other two lines are going to do really well and easy to sell themselves. People know Azul, people know Century, but Blackout, because it's a pricier game. I mean, the MSRP, I didn't put it on here, but I believe it's $70 US. This is the next great Alexander Pfister game. So if you don't know who Alexander Pfister is, he's the designer of Great Western Trail, Mombasa, Broom Service winning the Kennerspiel a couple years ago. I think just mentioning the fact that it's Great Western Trail's designer should perk up interest in those fans. We have a really unique game theme. This is what happens when a blackout occurs in the world's brightest city in Hong Kong. It's a resource management game, a hand management game. There's a not necessarily, I don't want to call it an area control element, but there's a map and spatial element where you're trying to do your best to capture blocks around here. I would do a disservice if I try to explain the rules in a minute or two. This is definitely one of the hot new games that you're going to want to pick up. The target audience for this is going to be obviously your fans for the medium to heavy Euros, the hardcore gamers. There's also a solo and campaign mode included in the box. So there's going to be a little extra value added to those who may not be playing with other people. You know, I play a lot of solo games, but also a campaign mode. So someone who maybe want to challenge themselves to do multiple, I think it's only 5 or 6 games in the campaign, but who want to just get a little bit of narrative arc over these games and try to challenge themselves because it's set up to be a little different than the base game. So that's Blackout Hong Kong. I would expect to see, actually it's in stores now, but I would expect to see this, you know, being on top of a lot of reviewers' hot lists for the next year.
Yeah, just so retailers are familiar with the kind of timing of it. Originally this game was released at Essen from Plan B in very short supply, and then the game made its way to us, unfortunately, through our lovely friends at Customs a little later than what we would have expected. We missed the holidays with this, but it came out late January. I believe it was like January 27th or January 28th. If anyone is familiar with Richard Ham, who is Rado online, he has a great review site. He actually said that this was his favorite design of Andrew Pfister's, which is pretty big words considering that Great Western Trail is in the top 10 of all games on BGG and in the top 10 of strategy. So to hear that from someone as, you know, revered as Richard is really good stuff. So this is, in my opinion, I agree with Richard. I have played all of Alexander Pfister's games, and while I love Great Western Trail, Blackout does something for me that as a player is very unique in that it adds thematics to a traditional Euro resource management game. And that's not to say that other Euro resource games don't have that thematic on it, but this really digs in on the thematic. There's actually like scenarios and there's like a story behind it. And it's really kind of cool. So it's just good stuff to know.
Precisely. So I think that's all I had. Oh, sorry. So just basic board setup. Not uncommon to think that a heavy or heavier Euro is going to be looking a little complex. This, believe it or not, a lot of people that I've talked to, and I'm a little impartial because I've seen this through multiple iterations, but a lot of people I spoke to said, okay, the first game, always a tough teach whenever you got a medium plus game, but it was simpler after I've learned the rules, simpler than Great Western Trail, and a little simpler than Mombasa, his other heavy Euro, and it plays a little quicker once I've gotten my bearings straight on the matter. So that's really all I had for in terms of presentation. Let me slide over here to go back to camera mode and see if there's any questions I can address or if there's anything that can come up.
Sure. There's actually Sean Wainwright from Phoenix Fire Games. Hello,
Oh, I
Sean.
know
Thanks for
Sean.
joining. Yeah, Sean is the shortest retailer I know. No, I'm kidding. He said, have we reached an ETA on Camel Up restock? So yes and no. So Camel Up is on the water to us right now. I can tell you we have a full container of that coming over, which is a massive amount of games. It's done really well for us and obviously Plan B. We don't have a specific date on that yet. And just to be very direct with all the retailers, we're trying to get much tighter on the dates that we message to all of you so that you're familiar. Actually, let me back up so that you know what's coming out, when it's coming out, specifically when we know it's coming out. We have been bitten, especially in the last maybe 6 months or so, with a lot of port changes where the port has caused delays for customs. And we've given a date because we know things are scheduled for X date, and it's ended up delayed by a week or two. So we're specifically trying to make sure that when we give a date on any of our exclusive products, we know exactly when they're landing and when they're coming in. I can tell you though, it is on the water, so it should be here fairly soon. It's just a matter of getting that all through customs and getting it going. So it shouldn't be too much longer, Sean. Tabitha has a great question, and this is probably something for you to answer, Mike. So how does Golem fit into the Century trilogy? So I'll let you take that one.
So, long story short, we when we originally conceived Century, it was our intention that we were going to. This is going back to F2Z days, but back when Sophie and the crew was with Z-Man. So it was originally intended to be two different games. Century, well, at the time it was called Caravan, Spice Road, and Caravan Golem Edition. We went to some retailers. We went to distributors, and there wasn't a ton of interest on the Golem version. Fans really liked it. They thought the art was amazing, so we kind of shelved it. So the Century series, to answer your question directly, the Century trilogy is Century Spice Road, Century Eastern Wonders, as well as Century New World. But for fan service, you go back 2 years ago, we went ahead and published Century Golem to be direct-to-consumer fulfillment through us, as well as through conventions. But there was enough demand that it reached to distributor level, and GTS, as well as a couple other ones across the world, went ahead and picked it up. So it's served as a one-off. That being said, there's been a very vocal community of fans for the Golem edition. They want to see sequels that Spice Road has seen and have its own trilogy. The editorial team has heard this. They, as far as I'm aware, they have not made a final decision on the matter yet. So we may see a sequel, or maybe we will see a trilogy. So if you're interested in this, or maybe maybe your fans or your consumers are, tell them to shoot up the message to us through social media, hit us up through email, let us know, because anything that would help influence that and sway them is always appreciated.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, so we do carry Golem through distribution now. When Golem was first announced, it was something that Plan B only had on their website. I believe had it for about maybe about 6 months on the website only, because as Mike mentioned, it was something designed to really be more as like a show thing, something as a special thing for fans and stuff like that. And then the demand just became so big that it was, hey, you got to get this into distribution, right? So that is available. We actually. We have seen steady sales of all the Century titles of Spice Road and of Eastern Wonders. Golem has also been steady. Some people kind of try to make an argument sometimes of, oh, well, this is going to cannibalize that, or this is going to cannibalize this. While they're the same game mechanically, aesthetically, they're very different, and they actually provide a very different experience based on your love of art and what you like. Whether you like that old world art or you like that more fantasy sci-fi kind of art for the Golem type stuff. I own both, and I love playing both. It's really cool. So. And we saw a great uptick. In fact, I went to a franchise meeting for a retailer this weekend, and they made mention about Golem, about how they can't keep it in stock. They're like, it just constantly, it comes in 1 or 2 cases and turns around, they sell through, and then reorder. So that's been very exciting to see that be popular with the fan base as well.
Yeah, no, I've seen the same thing, and the way I kind of approach the two is that it's like Pepsi Coke. Which one do you prefer? If it's me and my game buddies, who are frankly a bunch of 30, 40-year-old, overweight white dudes like me, a lot of us like that kind of drab, boring Mediterranean style. If I play with my 12-year-old daughter, who's big time into mangas and into anime, Golem all day, every day. So it's what I think it's proved as a really interesting experiment as to how popular different art styles are when the game's identically the same.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing. Carrie just asked, people ask about expansions for Golem all the time. Art is gorgeous, and I think an expansion would tip the scales on people facilitating on picking it up. Yeah, no, I think, that like Mike said, any kind of feedback we can get like that, feel free to send that feedback to us at GTS. Feel free to send that feedback to Plan B. Obviously, with us being their exclusive hobby distributor in the U.S., we're happy to get that feedback to them. So if retailers do feel that they would be just as successful with another version of Eastern Wonders Golem or a New World Golem or anything like that, and you want to have more, then let us know and we'll pass it on to them, and hopefully they can make a decision off that stuff, which would be great.
Yeah, I to compliment the team, I think that we do a pretty good job keeping our ear to the ground. When we hear consumer interest or demand, hey, we really want a Golem edition, we bring it out. Hey, I wish that Azul tile wasn't a cardboard tile. I wish it was a real tile. We listen to demand. I wish we had a convention version of a giant Azul that I can buy. We listen to demand. So the best advice I can give and be happy to share, make sure that you tell GTS, make sure you tell us. That will help influence the editorials team's decision, because as we all know, resources, including manpower and time and money, are all limited. So if we know that there's enough interest in there and it's worthwhile, then and it makes sense, then we'll go after it.
And Mike, that actually leads to a very good question. So if people do want to get a hold of you or at Plan B Games, what is the best way for them to reach out to you guys to give you feedback around things like that?
My best advice is to hit us up on info@planbgames.com. That's going to go to Alex and the customer service team. If you'd rather send it directly to me, I'll be glad to forward it up to the chain. I have, by all mission, I have no more influence than the average person. I'm a step maybe above the low man on the totem pole, but you're welcome to email me directly if you prefer. Mike at Plan B Games, but we're also on social media, primarily on Facebook. But if you find us on Instagram or Twitter, you're totally welcome to hit us up there as well.
Sure. Sean Wainwright asked another question. Speaking of Giant Azul, are you making another one similar to Sintra? So a giant Sintra, possibly. That would be a really big tower to have to drop those into.
I don't think that there's anything in the works. And if there would be, I think it would be presented. We would have it presented by now. So I don't want to dash any hopes and dreams, but I don't think that there are. But I think Azul was like a tempest in a teacup. It was a once in a lifetime kind of thing, a lightning in a bottle, where it's just the right timing for everything. Will we see a giant Sintra? Maybe. Same thing if there's interest, so if there's enough interest for it, email us. It's something we could consider for sure.
Another question came in. Lisa Johnson asked, are the Century playmats available through GTS? Unfortunately, no. The playmats are something that Plan B has specifically for them to sell through their website and for shows only. They keep them as what they call goodies, which are basically like, extra add-ons to the game. So we actually, unfortunately, don't have access to those. We just have access to the games. And just also to kind of tag on to that, if anyone hasn't seen or heard of what the Giant Azul is, just to be very clear, the Giant Azul is also not available through distribution at all anywhere. So that's something that Plan B made a very, very limited amount of copies of that they have for their shows and be able to, drum up as much attention to the game at shows as possible. So.
Yeah, I don't want to dash any hopes and dreams. Again, I think it was like a P500 series that we basically, we met a pre-order of about 500, 600 and pressed print on it.
That's an expensive thing for sure. Norman Herrick asked a question. He said, a lot of brands have success with play kits. Are there any plans with this for your titles? So I'll let you take that if you want, then I'll add on to maybe the demo program at the end here.
Sure. Well, that's what I was going to kind of mention is that I know that I believe that GTS has been in correspondence with N2, which is in our sales team, to start developing some demo kits for retailers, because 100% I see the value of brick and mortar stores. You guys really are the lifeblood of the hobby. And anything that we could see to help benefit you guys comes back and benefits us. So that being said, we'll see that. I know that we also have a couple things in the works that we're trying to develop some tournament kits for some of the more popular games. So we've been kicking around some ideas about a Century tournament series as well as a Camel Up tournament series. Something that we could see not only being done at conventions, but also at retailers for special events. Whenever and however that may shape up, obviously we'll make sure that GTS shares that with you guys, because they'll likely be one of our partners when it comes to distributing that information, as well as that any kits or anything like that to retailer merchants like you guys.
Yeah, that's a good summary of it right there. That's perfect. John says he wants a large-scale junk art. I do too. I don't want to be the guy responsible for cleaning up the floor after that. I could damage a floor.
I'm really proud to say that I have one of 3 copies in the world. It's actually sitting over in my garage.
Nice.
I just moved. So
Sean Wainwright says he wants a life-size camel up. there is a life-size camel up. It's actually at the Giza pyramids in Egypt. You just, if you can pick up that pyramid and shake it and drop the die out, Sean, that's all up to you. So.
If we can figure out a way to get the camel to stand on top of the other camel,
that'd be pretty hard. So I do have to admit, if anyone hasn't seen it, when Plan B relaunched Camel Up through Eggertspiele, there were a lot. This is not the same game, and it's really important to say this because I've had so many of my own personal friends who are gamers talk to me about it, and they're like, "Oh, well, I have the Camel Up that is older from Z-Man Games that won the Spiel des Jahres," and I'm like, "Yes," and that's great, right? But aesthetically, lots of things have changed. The pyramid is no longer cardboard. The pyramid is actually molded plastic, which is A, tremendous in terms of durability, but B, it is phenomenal in terms of painting. If you have any people who want to paint miniatures, this thing can actually come out and look absolutely gorgeous. The second thing is they actually added new rules to the game so that you can play the game like it always has traditionally been played, but there are additional things like these crazy camels that are included in the game as well, which can even add on to how you play the game. So I'm actually a proud owner of both the original and the new one. That is the game. It's a game that's very near and dear to my heart. My youngest son, Wyatt, who's now 11, he was never into board games, no matter what we tried to do and how we tried to push it. And for some reason, Camel Up clicked with him, and that was the game that really made it happen for him. And he absolutely loves the new one, and I can always see it when he teaches his friends that kids just latch onto that. While it's in the Eggertspiele line, as Mike pointed to, it's a great family game. It's a great thing to be able to bring a bunch of people together around a table and play. And yeah, Sean just made a comment. He said the biggest selling feature is the pop-up tree. It's funny you say that, because when you do open the board, there is a 3-dimensional tree, almost like a pop-up book that folds out, and you see the palm trees. And it's amazing to see that reaction to players when you whip it out for the first time and you pull out that board and people are like, whoa, what is that? It's small and simple, but these are the things, and this is one of the reasons that GTS has such a good partnership with Plan B, and we believe so strongly in their brand and their games and their messaging, is that they don't just make games. They make products. They make products that bring people to the table and want you to get invested in their games. And it's a small little detail, that tree, but it's something that sticks with you and creates a memory and makes you want to pull the game out again, which is really, really cool. So
my wife's a teacher, and I get a ton of I'm just going to call them muggles, but a ton of non-gamers, and we do game nights once or twice a month, and we had 4 or 5 teachers over here, and I said, well, we got a game that's going to accommodate this. We just got Camel Up. I said, we got to play this one because I love it. And yeah, just to witness their experience, and this ranges from kindergarten up to 6th grade for these teachers, just the kind of wow in their eyes when they see a pop-up. They have pop-up books, but they've never seen it in a board game. And number 2, the game's so accessible and fun. So now whenever we get together, they always want to play at the pop-up tree. They can't remember the game, but they want to play the pop-up tree game. What was that game? It had camels or something like that, but it had that cool pop-up tree. So
great. Now you've just started a whole new movement. Now there's going to be Twitter movements about how Plan B is creating the pop-up tree game. They're going to be looking for that. So.
It starts trending.
So John had a question. What about support for fan conventions that are not specifically gaming conventions? Can you talk a little bit about the game, maybe the conventions you do go to, and kind of Plan B's strategy around that?
Yeah, this is one of the trickiest things for us, is that there's tons of groups and there's tons of conventions. We don't have all the copies in the world and all the money in the world to do it. The trickiest thing for us is that we're shipping from Canada, which makes it really tough to support everyone's, especially, smaller conventions. What we are in the process of doing, I've been building a group of demo volunteers all around the country, people who work with us at different shows, to see if, hey, Mom and Pop has a 500-person attendee convention, 350-person attendee convention. Could I send you some games maybe to help support them, or donate to their Play to Win library, or when I see you next at a convention, I can give you some copies knowing that you'll be going there. Because it's so expensive to ship international. It costs actually more than the cost of the game to produce than to ship it to you guys. That being said, I don't want to discourage you. If you want to send requests, the best person to send it to would probably be me, Mike at planbgames.com. Put that in there. We'll ask for I'll ask for basic information. If you include that up front, the convention size, your expected turnout, what sort of things, would we see benefit from? Like, would you include us in some marketing efforts online, or maybe in your print flyers, whatever? Anything that I can help bring to marketing to get a rubber stamp on is helpful. But namely, how big is it? Where's it located? I'm not perfect at responding to email, but if you give me at least a month or 2 months headway, I can see what I can do to support you. Or if you're also attending a trade show that we're at, whether it's Gen Con, Origins, Dice Tower, Essen, if you're there, hit us up. Like, look for me. I'm going to be at most of the domestic shows. Hit me up. If I can see you there, that would kind of alleviate the cost of shipping. And I'd rather hand you off a copy then and there. And then the only thing I'll ask for return is like maybe some imagery so that I can share on our social media, as well as some stuff to help broadcast and signal boost you guys. So the way I look at it, just a little give and take. You give us a little bit, we'll support you as best we can.
Awesome. So one final thing I want to share with the retailers, this has been kind of a recurring discussion over the last couple of webinars, and it's something that we believe really strongly in. There's so much noise, and Mike and I talked a little bit about this before the webinar went live. There is so much noise in the board game market for retailers to have to weed through and determine what's the good games, what's the hot games. Even if you're plugged in, and I've had many conversations about this before, where even if you are attached to BGGCon, attached to Reddit, attached to Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and seeing the things coming out, it's still extremely challenging, even if it's your full-time job and all you're focused on is board games, to keep up with all the hot stuff. The growing trend of the discussion that we're really trying to help kind of guide people down is around branding. And Mike talked a little bit about this at the beginning of his presentation, is that the imprints that are inside of Plan B's kind of umbrella all focus on a specific brand and a specific style. And that to me is very, very helpful from a retailer's perspective, because as a retailer, you know that you only have so much time to get someone interested in a product if they pick it up, or you see them picking it up, or if they just walk in and you ask them, hey, thanks for coming in today. What are you looking for? What kind of games do you like? And things like that. That it's much easier to sell consumers on a brand than it is to sell them on a product. And that kind of trickles all the way downhill, right? And this is, again, one of the big reasons that we believe so much in Plan B, is that their brands are very succinct, they're very distinct, and they're very focused on how to deliver the best experience inside of each of those brands. So I think that's a great opportunity for retailers to just know that, that it's something I know Plan B focuses very heavily on. It's something that you look at when you bring out new games. What imprint is this the best for? What will provide the best response for the consumers, which will then help the retailer sell more. So if you are a retailer and you are in that kind of boat of, I want to find brands and I want to find strong brands to carry in the store, not having to worry about individual products, Plan B is one of the best on the market, if not the best, to be able to do that for you. So it's really good stuff. So cool. It does not look like we have any additional questions coming in. So with that, I'll go ahead and let's kind of go towards the wrap up. Just as a reminder for everyone who is here live, if you are a GTS retail customer, you'll be eligible to get a free copy of demo of Blackout Hong Kong for your stores, which is awesome. We'll get all that information over to the GTS sales reps after this, so that we'll be able to get those over to you. In addition, if you order Blackout Hong Kong, which is in stock right now, or if you pre-order Tuki or Century A New World between today, April 29th, and next Monday, May 6th, you'll be able to get 52% off MSRP as well. So great little advantage also. And I did put emails into the chat window. So if people wanted to get a hold of Plan B, it's info@Plan B Games. If you want to get a hold of Mike directly, it's Mike@Plan B Games. We'll make sure to put that into the video recap when we post it on YouTube, of course, as well. If anyone wants to reach out to me, feel free to hit me at smorris@gtsdistribution.com. As always, definitely want to thank everyone from a retail perspective from being here. I know how much time you guys have to put into your store and how much focus you have to put on it, but we really do appreciate you taking the time to join us every Monday morning. Really do appreciate the feedback too. Any feedback you have about this webinar or upcoming webinars, or if there's a publisher we haven't had on that you'd like us to have on, feel free to let us know. Mike, thank you very much. Really do appreciate this. Was great information, and I hope that it was very helpful for the retailers. I know it was covering all kind of bases on everything, but it was a really good summary of Plan B and your focus and your goals and the great games that you guys bring out. So really do appreciate it.
Yeah, my honor and genuinely my pleasure to all the retailers who are attending and taking time out of their day, because I know how busy you guys are. It means a lot to all of us. So.
Awesome. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. We will see you next Monday with another webinar. And until we see you, have a wonderful week in the stores. Thanks so much.